who don't have a seat at the table but need us to fight for them tirelessly. When you look at this, I see a couple of different buckets of ways that bad actors are taking advantage of our children, and in some of the most extreme situations, we lose that child, whether to death or to self-harm, and I think we owe it to them to do something about it. So first is social media. Tell me, what are you doing? I have sat across from a number of parents who have talked to me about their child either falling victim to sextortion, different schemes that are online. We also know that there is an element of human trafficking that comes here. Let's start with social media. What are you doing to hold bad actors accountable, to track them down, and to keep our kids safe?
Senator, first, thank you for bringing that up. This, I believe, is what an oversight hearing should be about.
Thank you.
Not yell, oh, he's gone already. He comes in and leaves. This is what an oversight hearing should be about, trying to help parents and children online. Yes, Director Patel has been doing a great job. The FBI, we have an entire unit. Not only that, our National Security Division is working internationally.
Well, and I want to talk about that too, because I think a lot of this comes from overseas.
Yes.
And so whether it's these schemes, the sextortion schemes,
Yes.
et cetera, it's happening off our shores. How are you connecting the dots there? And then additionally, let's look at human trafficking. And you find a number of times people are lured into this from posts on social media. I believe that that is a global trafficking ring. I would like to speak to what are you doing to make sure you're holding those people accountable and getting to the bottom of it, finding bad actors and making sure that we're keeping these children safe.
Senator Britt, we have made countless cases around this country, and many of them have involved global, international defendants. In fact, we've been extraditing some of them back. As many as we can get, we're bringing them back to this country. That's how we're holding them accountable and locking them up for as long as we humanly can lock them up. And Director Patel, our National Security Division, have been working tirelessly on that. We have entire units working on that. I think the most
Do you feel like you've made better strides
Yes.
than we saw over the last
Yes,
4 years?
we have made incredible strides. I'm sorry, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but yes, we have made, I'll
I would love
provide
to
those
get
to you.
those from you. I want to make sure that we are doing that. I also obviously have worked diligently alongside Senator Blackburn and so many others to put the proper guardrails in place when it comes to social media to prevent these things from happening to our children, allowing them to still thrive online, but knowing the threats that are out there, it is incumbent upon us to actually do something about it. So I hope that those different pieces of legislation that would help keep kids safe, help give you additional tools, I hope that this body and ultimately Congress will take those up.
Can I add something to
Yeah,
that?
sure.
That parents also, I always say your child has no right to privacy on the internet, and parents need to monitor what their kids are doing. Now, we all know that even elementary kids, school kids, so many of them have cell phones. Because they're at school, they're latchkey kids, they're riding the bus home. So many children have cell phones, but parents, you have to monitor. There are safeguards you can put on the phone, but you have to monitor what your kids are doing on the internet.
I do think that there is some accountability that needs to be held even with social media providers.
Absolutely.
Because I know that, for instance, we had a Judiciary subcommittee hearing where we heard from parent after parent whose child had bought something online that they thought to be maybe a different type of drug. It was laced with fentanyl and they died. If that was happening on a storefront and a small business in America, we would shut that storefront down. We must do more to hold not only the bad actors online, but also the people who allow it to happen accountable. And I hope that you'll commit to work with me on that.
I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you,
So
Senator.
staying in that vein on parents, looking at illegal gaming across, again, this is a global thing, offshore illegal gaming. We have found that young men in particular have been targeted when it comes to betting and being involved in this legal gaming. We're finding that through whether it be advertisements or things that are directly targeted to get them addicted and get them pulled in and addicted on that. When it comes to illegal gaming, will you commit to me to taking a look at what is exactly happening offshore and also how they are utilizing different spaces to actually go after our children, getting them addicted, and ultimately pulling them in?
Certainly, and I'm also sure the FBI would welcome working with you.
Wonderful. And then last but not least on that same vein, and you touched on it earlier when one of my colleagues asked you about this, but vaping. So if you're a parent and you're sitting here looking, Chinese vapes have, this is a real issue. You spoke a little bit about what you are worried will come next in this space. What are you doing to get to the bottom of that, and how are we going to make sure that these don't infiltrate our markets and ultimately don't end up in the hands of our children?
What we've been doing is we have been going around this country and we have been raiding these vape shops that are carrying these illegal drugs and shutting them down. And that's what Senator Kennedy and I were in Illinois doing. We were announcing that arrest. It was a massive arrest of illegal vapes from China, mainly coming in through China, laced with THC. Back to the, I was just saying, back to the child predators. Since January 20th, we have made 2,580 child exploitation cases, Senator Britt. That was the number I was trying to get my hands on.
Wow. And
that's 250 more than last year.
will you commit to continuing to go after these unregulated products and particularly make sure that they are not in the hands of our children?
Yeah, and Senator Britt, we need to do that because it's targeting our children. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Today is obviously the second anniversary of the horrific attacks on October 7th. And this morning I had an opportunity to listen to stories of some individuals that had been held hostage, some of the families that will never get their loved ones back, and some that are hoping that there is a resolution soon and they once again get to embrace their family member that they have not seen in over 700 days. It was a reminder of, one of them said, you know, I can breathe, but I can't live until this is resolved. And we know in addition to this horror and nightmare that they have been living for the past 2 years, we have seen a rise in anti-Semitism here on our soil. When we said never again actually has to mean never again. And I know that you and I spoke about this briefly when you were in front of this committee, but can you talk to me about the work that DOJ is doing to combat that rise in anti-Semitism and to hold offenders of that, to hold them accountable?
And Senator Britt, thank you for again bringing up that today is the second anniversary of that horrific attack on Israel. Donald Trump is the greatest peace president of our lifetime, probably in our history. And if anyone can resolve this, it will be Donald Trump. I've also met with many of the families of the hostages and of those who have lost loved ones. We are combating anti-Semitism throughout this country, not only through my Civil Rights Division, and we haven't really talked about Harmeet Dillon a lot today, but Harmeet Dillon runs our Civil Rights Division, and she is working with Leo Terrell, and they are combating anti-Semitism around this country. We have an anti-Semitism task force that we're forming.
Do you mind getting me an update on the progress that that task force has made, please?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And last, in my last remaining minute, certainly appreciate the work that you're doing. I know my colleague, Senator Lee, already asked you about the attacks on ICE officers. Thank you for working to keep our federal agents safe, federal law enforcement safe. So thank you for the work that you're doing there. I do want to just talk a little bit about crime in American cities. We had a horrific event occur in Montgomery, Alabama over the weekend, and 14 people, 2 people are no longer with us, and 12 people injured. My heart breaks for every one of the victims and their families and the community at large. I'd like to know a little bit about your interagency work and talk to me about things that you find, because we have to find solutions in this space. This cannot keep happening. And what are you seeing that is, you know, your biggest success stories and your biggest challenges you have to working to try to resolve crime throughout the country?
Well, right now, the biggest challenge is that the federal government is shut down, but we're not letting that become a challenge because all of our agents are working tirelessly. And I get almost real-time updates from my agencies, Rob Sakata, who's the Deputy Director of ATF, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino at FBI, Terry Cole, at DEA, Gadi Saralta with our U.S. Marshals, and all of our great team of lawyers and we are working nonstop to combat crime. That's Donald Trump's only directive to me, is to make America safe again, and that's what we're going to do in this country, Senator Britt.
Well, thank you for your commitment and any best practices you have or ways that you have found to tackle challenges that are effective. Please let us know. We certainly want to see every community across our state and our country safe, and we appreciate yours and President Trump's commitment to doing that.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Britt. And I will just say thank you to our witness who has been sitting here for now for 4.5 hours without a break. I think maybe a little bit under the weather. And you have outlasted pretty much everyone here but Senator Britt and myself. So thank you for being here today.
I'm in good company.
Well, certainly coming in behind someone as strong and as passionate and as committed to doing the right thing and to justice. When you served as Attorney General in Florida, that was certainly a high bar that you set, and I was honored to come in after you as the Attorney General. You've touched on so many of the issues that you fought for in Florida that you are still fighting for now here in Washington, and whether that is protecting our children, protecting our law enforcement officers, protecting the rule of law. All of these things, your experiences, both personal and professional, are playing into how you are standing strong for what this country was built on in this role. And I, for one, am proud not only to be here as a United States Senator, the most junior member of this committee, but to be here and working in Washington right now with the honor of serving as a senator and watching this administration, and certainly you, bring this country back to its bearing, that we are a nation that is a government for the people with the consent of the governed. And if we are going to protect life, liberty, and their opportunity to pursue happiness, we have to guarantee safety. It has to be a mission. And that starts in our communities and our states. And I think what people are missing is the federal government has a set of laws that it is working within federal jurisdiction, that it is incumbent upon them to execute and enforce within the states. And I'm watching what has happened around this nation as a result of what has happened under the Biden administration and what they allowed to happen purposefully, whether that was rogue prosecutors, defunding police, decriminalizing crime, allowing juveniles to run rampant with no accountability, revolving jailhouse door, no respect for the rule of law. It goes on and on and on. And you're seeing that now playing out in the cities around this country. And what is very terrifying, and I think you would agree.
I want to say this is the second anniversary of Hamas invading the sovereign state of Israel. Yesterday, I had some Palestinian advocates talk to me about the number of people being killed. I like to remind them there wouldn't be one death if there hadn't been this invasion of the sovereign state of Israel by what happened 2 years ago today. Attorney General Bondi, since your confirmation, you've now had the opportunity to face the federal bureaucracy that you must reform to better serve the American people. As I said to Director Patel, your charter is no simple task. When you arrived, you were left with the Justice Department free fall. Senate Democrats have denied your leadership personnel. We haven't been able to confirm your Assistant Attorney General for Congressional Affairs. It's now been 7 months. All the while, Democrats complain that they can't get answers from the argument. I want to say this is the second anniversary of Hamas invading the sovereign state of Israel. Yesterday, I had some Palestinian advocates talk to me about the number of people being killed. I like to remind them there wouldn't be one death if there hadn't been this invasion This is the second anniversary of Hamas invading the sovereign state of Israel. Yesterday, I had some Palestinian advocates talk to me about the number of people being killed. I like to remind them there wouldn't be one death if there hadn't been this invasion of the sovereign state of Israel by what happened 2 years ago today. Attorney General Bondi, since your confirmation, I want to say this is the second anniversary of Hamas invading the sovereign state of Israel. Yesterday, I had some Palestinian advocates talk to me about the number of people being killed. I like to remind them there wouldn't be one death if there hadn't been this invasion of the sovereign state of Israel by what happened 2 years ago today. Attorney General Bondi, since your confirmation, you've now had the opportunity to face the federal bureaucracy that you must reform to better serve the American people. As I said to Director Patel, your charter is no simple task. When you arrived, you were left with the Justice Department free fall. Senate Democrats have denied your leadership personnel. We haven't been able to confirm your Assistant Attorney General for Congressional Affairs. It's now been 7 months. All the while, Democrats complain that they can't get answers from the Office of Ledge Affairs. They have blocked the confirmation of that person. Since your confirmation, you've taken steps to institute needed reforms. Under your leadership, the Justice Department has cut funding to politicize programs to reinvest in core policing activities. Focusing on crime and getting tough on criminals is a welcome change from 4 years of Biden administration's soft on crime policies. During the Biden administration, the Justice Department failed to collect billions of dollars in criminal fines and penalties from corporate offenders. That's money should have been. Talk to me about the number of people being killed. I like to remind them there wouldn't be one death if there hadn't been this invasion of the sovereign state of Israel by what happened 2 years ago today. Attorney General Bondi, since your confirmation, you've now had the opportunity to face the federal bureaucracy that you must reform to better serve the American people. As I said to Director Patel, your charter is no simple task. When you arrived, you were left with the Justice Department free fall. Senate Democrats have denied your leadership personnel. We haven't been able to confirm your Assistant Attorney General for Congressional Affairs. It's now been 7 months. All the while, Democrats complain that they can't get answers from the Office of Ledge Affairs. They have blocked the confirmation of that person. Since your confirmation, you've taken steps to institute needed reforms. Under your leadership, the Justice Department has cut funding to politicize programs to reinvest in core policing activities. Focusing on crime and getting tough on criminals is a welcome change from 4 years of Biden administration's soft on crime policies. During the Biden administration, the Justice Department failed to collect billions of dollars in criminal fines and penalties from corporate offenders. That's money should have been placed in the Crime Victims Fund, and much of the money of the past administration did collect went to the Justice Department slush funds instead of aiding victims of criminals and violent activity. My Democratic colleagues have shared concerns about funding agency and law enforcement, but generally haven't supported funding programs. Under the Democrat leadership, the COPS reauthorization was held over in committee at least 8 times before the 118th Congress concluded. It never received a vote in this committee. More recently, Democrats have refused to support fundamental Justice Department programs like Protect Safe Neighborhoods, and last week, Democrats again blocked most of the Police Week bills from passing the Senate, even though they passed out of this committee unanimously. In contrast to these indefensible positions, the judiciary provisions in the Republican reconciliation bill made hundreds of millions of dollars available to the Justice Department to combat crime. Attorney General Bondi, you've also created task force to attack the problems left by your predecessor. You've created a team to review the overwhelming evidence of political weaponization by federal law enforcement, including the discredited Crossfire Hurricane investigations. Your weaponization working group has worked with my staff to bring forward resolutions for whistleblowers, and I commend you and your staff efforts to find solutions for these patriots. I understand the task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias has done an investigation in how the Biden administration weaponized the government against people of faith. I look forward to your next report on that subject. Now, you've also shuttered a certain task force that was a stain on this country, the Foreign Influence Task Force. Democrats have cried about closing this misleadingly named unit. The task force was involved in undermining my and Senator Johnson's Biden family investigation. Instead of rooting out foreign influence, the task force became a political weapon. And speaking of political weapons, I'm now going to address examples of political weaponization in the previous administration. Most recently, I and Senator Johnson made public information relating to Arctic frost, expansive targeting of Republicans, and on Monday, just yesterday, because of our investigative work, the FBI disclosed that the Biden administration used Arctic frost to target Republican senators, including several senators on this very committee. This is an outrage, an unconstitutional breach, and ought to be immediately addressed by you and Director Patel. It's also a clear example of why the Justice Department has had to fire personnel who you hear Democrats defending. While on the taxpayer's dime, these now fired employees not only weaponized law enforcement, but some of them also retaliated against patriotic whistleblowers. These are indefensible acts. Now I've obtained additional weaponization records thanks to brave whistleblowers that predate Arctic frost. I've obtained documents created by then Supervisory Special Agent Tebow, dated March 2, 2017. The title of this document is quote unquote Trump, and it appears to relate to matters different than Crossfire Hurricane. This document discusses a rumor at FBI headquarters that the FBI's Washington field office was leaning towards opening a case on the Trump campaign. Tebow noted they weren't close to opening an investigation, but did say this, quote, "What are we doing? Aggressively seeking out open source information human intelligence info that could predicate a case, end of quote. You see, less than 2 months into the Trump's first presidency, the partisan Comey FBI was very hard at work trying to manufacture another case against Trump. Tebow and the FBI eventually got their wish in April 2022 with the opening of Arctic frost. This was a political fishing expedition to get Trump at all costs, just like Crossfire Hurricane. And of course, it's a disgrace to the taxpayers. Whistleblowers have provided me with another document. This document is a 2017 case, updated, also drafted by then Supervisor Special Agent Tebow. This is a case update for CR 15, the now disbanded and discredited Public Corruption Squad at FBI's Washington field office, which says, quote, McAuliffe case, Steve Sullivan, Chief Financial Officer of Teneo, was interviewed in New York City. Info provided seemed to confirm Teneo was used as a pass-through for Doug Band to pay former President of the United States, end of quote. Doug Band was deputy assistant to then President Clinton and continued to work for him in post-presidency. Therefore, it's pretty clear that the reference to the President of the United States is Bill Clinton. The document further notes additional interviews the FBI planned to conduct as part of the case. This information confirms there was an FBI case on McAuliffe, and it indicates the Clintons and their associates were relevant to it. Did the FBI throw its resources behind this matter just like it did against Trump and his associates? A legitimate question. Or did they sweep it under the rug? A legitimate question. So, General Bondi, I'd like to have you provide me with all the records relating to these matters for further verification. Lastly, whistleblowers have provided me additional records related to the Biden FBI political conduct against Peter Navarro. The first document is a request for physical surveillance on Navarro the day the FBI arrested him. The second document is a timeline of that surveillance. When Navarro, the FBI didn't arrest him at his house, which was literally right next to the FBI headquarters. Instead, they surveilled him and his fiancée all morning, starting at his home, following them to the airport, and then arrested him in public at the Reagan airport. The way Navarro was treated is unnecessary. General Bondi, I would like you to provide me all records relating to this matter. Attorney General Bondi, this Congress, I've made public one document after another, one whistleblower disclosure after another, one example of weaponization after another. So to our average constituent, this is all history, but it's all pointing out the wrong of government, using the power of government to go after people, they're political people you don't like. We're pointing this all out because we can't have this repeated in the United States. We want to end to it right now, whether we have Republican or Democrat administrations. All evidence of your predecessors' total failures. It's time for accountability. And I look forward to hearing about your success in that regard. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chairman Grassley, for holding this oversight hearing. Welcome, Attorney General Bondi. I'm glad that we are following this committee's longstanding tradition of regular oversight hearings with the Attorney General, the Director of the FBI, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. These hearings have never been more important as President Trump turns the full force of the federal government on Chicago and other American cities. The assault on the city I am proud to represent is just one example of how President Trump and Attorney General Bondi shut down justice at the Department of Justice even before the president's party, controlling the White House, Senate, and House of Representatives, shut down the government. The Attorney General has systematically weaponized our nation's leading law enforcement agency to protect President Trump and his allies and attack his opponents and, sadly, the American people. You have purged hundreds of senior career officials since you first appeared before us. These men and women had dedicated their careers to protecting the American people. As a result, the department has lost literally thousands of years of law enforcement expertise. To be specific, you disbanded the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force and the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, despite the growing threat of foreign election interference and the drastic rise in cryptocurrency crimes. You forced out almost 75% of the Civil Rights Division's career attorneys, while hate crimes are on the rise. You fired more than 100 immigration judges, while the immigration case backlog is more than 3 million. You cut the public integrity section from 30 prosecutors to 2, while political corruption skyrockets. During your confirmation hearing, I asked you about your many potential conflicts of interest as a former lobbyist. You responded under oath, quote, "You will consult with career ethics officials within the department and make the appropriate decision," end of quote. But the Justice Department then removed those career ethics officials and put in their place inexperienced political appointees beholden to President and you. And you've effectively shut down the Office of Professional Responsibility, which investigates misconduct by Department of Justice attorneys. Now, with these ethical guardrails out of the way, corruption has run rampant at the Department of Justice. Although you've been a registered foreign agent for Qatar, you did not recuse yourself from signing off on President Trump's solicitation of a free jet from the royal family, even though this gift was clearly illegal. Connections to Attorney General Bondi seem to yield more favorable outcomes for defendants. At least 2 long-running federal prosecutions were abruptly dropped after the defendants hired your brother. It's no surprise that Ed Martin, the failed U.S. Attorney nominee you appointed as senior official, said, quote, "No MAGA left behind." Our nation's top law enforcement agency has become a shield for the president and his political allies when they engage in misconduct. Last year, President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, was allegedly recorded accepting a $50,000 bag of cash in exchange for promising immigration enforcement-related contracts. Under your leadership, the investigation into Mr. Homan was dropped. After President Trump pardoned nearly 1,600 January 6 insurrectionists, including more than 600 charged with assaulting or impeding law enforcement, the Department of Justice is arguing in court that these pardons provide immunity for wholly unrelated crimes in multiple cases. Jared Weiss was filmed on January 6th, encouraging his fellow rioters to attack the Metropolitan Police Department officers. And he said, "F them, kill them." What happened to Mr. Weiss? He's been hired by you as a senior advisor. In February, you said the Epstein client list was, quote, "sitting on my desk right now for review." 8 months later, you still haven't produced these files, and a credible whistleblower told my office that FBI agents were directed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. The Department of Justice ordered the dismissal of corruption charges against the former New York City Mayor Eric Adams in a corrupt backroom deal to secure his cooperation with the president's immigration agenda. Acting U.S. Attorney Daniel Sassoon, a Republican appointed by President Trump, resigned in protest. Acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, a Republican appointed by President Trump, was forced to resign because he didn't believe there was sufficient evidence to indict New York Attorney General Letitia Adams or former FBI Director James Comey. In his place, President Trump installed his former personal attorney, someone with no prosecutorial experience, to indict Director Comey, which she did. She joins a network of unqualified MAGA loyalists masquerading as federal prosecutors, like Alina Habba, who said she would use her position to, quote, turn New Jersey red, close quote, and Sigal Chattah, who once said that a black political opponent was, quote, should be hanging from an effing crane, end of quote. The president and attorney general attempted to bypass the Senate to install these unqualified extremists. Where do you find these people? Courts have ruled that both Ms. Habba and Ms. Chattah are serving in their roles illegally, jeopardizing countless prosecutions by your office. Why? And that's just one example of how the Department of Justice is making America less safe. Attorney General Bondi shut down the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force, OSADEF, which has dismantled thousands of criminal organizations. And you diverted thousands of FBI, DEA, and ATF agents and DOJ prosecutors from their critical missions to carry out the president's mass deportation agenda. Attorney General Bondi, not surprisingly, federal drug prosecutions have dropped to the lowest level in decades. Let me repeat that. Federal prosecutions for drug crimes have dropped to the lowest level in decades on your watch. Department of Justice has also unilaterally terminated 373 grants that provide critical funding to state and local law enforcement to the tune of $500 million. The 2026 Trump budget would slash the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program known as HIDA by more than a third, from $300 million to $196 million. Instead of taking common sense steps that have proven to help reduce crime, Attorney General, you're focusing on helping President Trump play strongman on television. He has illegally deployed troops to Chicago and other American citizens and has threatened to send more. The Justice Department defends this dubious legal basis for these deployments and diverts DOJ personnel and their components to assist in these efforts. These deployments basically target Democratic-run cities and Democratic leaders, ignoring many Republican-led areas of our country with even higher crime rates, and making clear that this is for political theater, not public safety. One particular chaotic raid in Chicago Tuesday last week, aided by the FBI and ATF, which you supervise. In the middle of the night, federal agents pulled women and children out of their beds, crashed down the doors to their homes, destroyed their apartments, zip-tied children and others, and detained immigrants and U.S. citizens alike for hours in vans. When one witness complained about the treatment of the small children, an agent laughed at her and said, "F them kids." On Friday, a federal judge appointed by President Trump held that deploying the National Guard in Portland is illegal. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller accused her of, quote, legal insurrection, close quote. At a time of rising threats to federal judges, this kind of language is inexcusable. Last week, the President and Secretary Hegseth summoned senior military officials to a political pep rally at Quantico, where the President said he wanted to use American cities as, quote, training grounds for our military. Training grounds for our military. To fight the, quote, enemy within. Chicago is not the enemy. Our fellow Americans are not the enemy. It is abhorrent for the President, who is supposed to represent all Americans regardless of political party, to describe anyone who disagrees with him in this manner. To my Republican colleagues who claim the previous administration weaponized the Department of Justice, President Biden retained President Trump's FBI Director Christopher Wray, who President Trump then fired. President Biden never directed the Attorney General to prosecute his political opponents. President Biden never fired his own political appointees for refusing to prosecute his targets. What has taken place since January 20th, 2025 would make even President Nixon recoil. This is your legacy, Attorney General Bondi. In 8 short months, you have fundamentally transformed the Justice Department and left an enormous stain in American history. It will take decades to recover. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Would you please rise so I can give you swear? Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated and give us your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Durbin, and every member of this committee. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify in front of you today. First, please join me in remembering, as you said, Chairman Grassley, all the Jewish people who lost their lives in the October 7th attacks 2 years ago today. Also, please let's pray for all the hostages and the families of all of those individuals. They are a critical reminder of our central mission here at the Department of Justice, protecting the safety and security of the American people. That is why, even when the government is otherwise shut down because of the Democrats, the department's law enforcement officers and prosecutors are hard at work fighting, protecting you from the threats, foreign and domestic. When I was confirmed as the 87th Attorney General of the United States, I took office with two main goals: to end the weaponization of justice and return the department to its core mission of fighting violent crime. As to ending the weaponization of justice, we learned that former FBI secretly investigated you and your colleagues. Why? They wanted to take President Trump off the playing field. They were playing politics with law enforcement powers and will go down as a historic betrayal of public trust. This is the kind of conduct that shatters the American people's faith in our law enforcement system. We will work to earn that back every single day. We are returning to our core mission of fighting real crime. While there is more work to do, I believe in 8 short months, we have made tremendous progress towards those ends. Our federal surges in Washington, D.C. and Memphis are a perfect example of how the Department of Justice should operate. We created strong partnerships with local leadership, working hand in hand with both cities to send resources where they were needed most. The results speak for themselves. We have made more than 3,800 arrests here in Washington while seizing more than 365 illegal guns. In Memphis, we have already made more than 300 arrests and close to 80 illegal guns in just a week. We are replicating that tough-on-crime approach throughout this country. Under the leadership of Director Kash Patel, the FBI is doing outstanding investigative work to keep American people safe. The FBI just conducted a months-long operation called Summer Heat, which resulted in over 8,600 arrests from June to September. More than 6,500 arrests fell under the FBI's violent crime and gang program. Under the leadership of Administrator Terry Cole, the DEA has seized 47.9 million fentanyl pills and 4,500 kilos of fentanyl powder. That represents 370 million deadly doses, 370 million. The DEA is dismantling violent cartel drug trafficking networks across this country, including the seizure of nearly 470 million in criminal assets. Under the leadership of Gadi Seralta, our U.S. Marshals have been the tip of the spear on federal surges and protecting judges and elected officials. Our Marshals have arrested more than 51,000 fugitives nationwide since January 20th. Under the leadership of Acting Director Dan Driscoll, ATF has taken more than 23,000 illegal guns off our streets. 3,400 of those guns have been linked to trafficking between the U.S. and Mexico. My attorneys have done incredible work advancing President Trump's agenda and protecting the executive branch from judicial overreach. We've been sued more than 400 times since January 20th. Judges have issued more than 90 temporary restraining orders against us, more than the previous several administrations combined. Despite the unprecedented degree of activism we've seen from the lower courts, we have never ignored a court order. And why would we? We have secured a historic 22 victories at the Supreme Court alone, with more to come. Our civil rights attorneys are fighting discrimination and anti-Semitism. Our criminal attorneys are prosecuting violent criminals and foreign terrorists every single day. I look forward to continuing this work at the Department of Justice, and I look forward to testifying before you today. Thank you, Chairman.
I forgot to turn on the microphone. Let me start over again. We have 10-minute rounds. I've asked Senator Blackburn to chair between 10:30 and 11. I hope that we can have good decorum during this hearing, treat each other with respect. General Bondi, just in case you get cut off with something that you don't get to answer your question when that senator's done, if you ask me for a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but a little bit of time to finish your answer, I'd be glad to give that to you. So starting myself, you inherited a bloated bureaucracy. It requires reorientation to better serve your mission of the department. That would include reassessing grants disguised to help Americans, but many were partisan pet projects. It also requires reallocation of resources to better serve the American people. On this issue, I've got two questions. What updates can you share with the committee about your review and grant DOJ and grants that DOJ has reassessed? Just give us some examples, don't I know?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. During my appearance at the department's budget hearings, I acknowledged that some grants were mistakenly terminated, and we have made a process to correct that. All grant termination appeals will be individually considered for alignment with our current policies, which are strengthening law enforcement and protecting victims. Recipients are given the opportunity to appeal a grant termination consistent with the rules by writing to the Assistant Attorney General. Of the 5,800 discretionary grants that were reviewed, only 376, approximately 7%, were terminated. So far, OJP has turned back on 18 awards, 17 appeals have been denied, and the rest are actively being reviewed, with decisions expected soon.
My colleagues on the other side claim that your department has reallocated resources to immigration enforcement, and it's had a negative impact on law enforcement. We know that drugs and crimes are very much a part of immigration enforcement, so these attacks are clearly off the mark. Explain your view of these misguided assertions.
Chairman, every day our FBI, DEA, ATF, and now U.S. Marshals working on a task force with Homeland Security are out there keeping Americans safe and getting illegal aliens out of our country, many of whom have committed violent crimes in this country. Our agents will continue to fight violent crime in this country, working hand in hand. One example is right here in Washington, D.C. We have the D.C. Task Force that has been incredibly successful. We are so proud of the work that has done. We have been working hand in hand with the local officials here in D.C., and we are very proud of that work. And we're taking that to Tennessee and around this country to keep Americans safe.
I won't repeat the things I've said about Arctic frost, but we had this recent revelation yesterday of my Republican senators being targeted by the government, underscoring the point about Arctic frost. When taken in context with widespread government weaponization against Trump and conservatives in the last decade, the conduct's arguably is worse than Watergate. So I got two questions along this line. How many Department of Justice and FBI personnel have been held accountable for their partisan and constitutional questionable conduct, and what was their punishment? if you could give a few examples or follow up in writing, since there's so many people that fall into this category.
Yes, Senator. Yes, Chairman, we will.
So you want to answer that in writing? Yeah, okay.
Yes, the exact number I can answer in writing. Yes.
Okay. Was Attorney General, on the same subject, was Attorney General Garland, Director Wray, and/or President Biden's White House aware of the FBI targeting Republican senators? Did they approve it? Now, let's be clear, either they knew and allowed it to happen, or they didn't know, and if they didn't know, it points to a lack of oversight of Jack Smith's runaway case.
Chairman Grassley, that's what we've been talking about when we refer to the weaponization of government. Operation Arctic Frost was an unconstitutional, undemocratic abuse of power. During Arctic Frost, the FBI also placed 92 linked Republican individuals and Republican groups, such as Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, on their list. This is the kind of conduct that shattered the American people's faith in our government, as I said in my opening statement. We are ending this weaponization. Our FBI is targeting violent criminals, child predators, and other lawbreakers, not sitting senators who happen to be from the wrong political party. Several of your colleagues sitting at this dais were targeted, and others. We will continue to stop that throughout the Justice Department. That is the ultimate weaponization of government.
Have you sought grand jury secrecy waivers so that all of Arctic Frost documents can be produced to Congress? And if not, do you plan to do that?
Chairman Grassley, I will be working directly with Director Patel on this issue, and there's not much more we can say about the issue for obvious reasons at this time.
Okay. Public Safety Officers Benefit Program, PSOB, provides benefits to law enforcement and first responders if they're disabled or killed in the line of duty. Affected family members may also benefit. My Oversight and a Government Accountability Office report shows that some claims have taken thousands of days to conclude. PSOB applicants have also informed my office that they've been left in tears with disrespectful ways they've been treated by the government. Question number 1 and 2 on this area, but I'll start just with 1. What actions have been taken to hold DOJ officials accountable for their failures to manage the program and treat applicants with respect?
Chairman Grassley, as stated earlier, there have been many terminations from the Department of Justice, and we stand by all of those. Many of those are subject to active litigation. This Department of Justice will treat everyone with respect, and we will do everything in our power to help citizens of this country. Please reach out to us with any individual cases, and I will personally look at them for you, Chairman.
Okay. So if you'll provide that information, that was my second question. So now let's go on to regarding the initial FBI 1023 document that I made public last Congress. That document mentioned 1, text messages, 2, audio recordings, and 3, financial records that allegedly approved a bribery scheme with the Biden family and foreign interest. I asked Director Patel if his predecessors made any effort to determine whether these records existed. He answered no. What steps has the department taken to determine whether these records exist? One way or another, this matter ought to be put to rest.
Chairman Grassley, I know Director Patel is working hard on this with the members of the FBI.
Okay. So we don't know if these records exist, or you just can't say that publicly at this point?
I don't want to discuss any of that publicly,
Okay.
Director.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act includes a safeguard to prevent political weaponization. The reauthorization mandated certain members and their staffs shall be entitled to attend any proceedings of the FISA court. Former Biden DOJ Assistant Attorney General Matt Olson drafted a privacy agreement that allowed the department to hide information from Congress during FISA proceedings. Matt Olson made a career out of targeting President Trump and his allies, so it's not surprising that he would attempt to hinder congressional oversight or cover up for the Biden regime. I want to make sure that you get rid of the ridiculous and misguided Olson memo. When can you tell me that will be done?
We will notify you, Chairman Grassley. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney General, let me ask you this question. Were you consulted by the White House before they deployed National Guard troops to cities in the United States?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House.
You won't even say whether you talked to the White House about this?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House with you, Ranking Member.
I noticed that. What's the secret? Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
Been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question. It's my responsibility. She refuses to answer as to whether she had any conversation with the White House about deploying national troops to my state. That's an indication, I'm afraid, where we are politically in this place. Let me ask you another question. I want to, if you will, hold on a second. Make sure I got the right page of facts here. You testified under oath when you last before this committee that before your appointment to Attorney General, you had served as a representative of some sort for the royal family of Qatar. There was an issue that came before you in May when President Trump accepted a $400 million luxury jet from the royal family of Qatar for temporary use as Air Force One before it's permanently gifted to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. The Constitution unequivocally bestows on Congress the power to control whether any officer of the United States, including the President, may accept a gift, quote, from any king, prince, or foreign state, end of quote. And this gift clearly violates the statutory regime enacted by Congress. You've refused to answer a letter I sent to you 5 months ago asking the legal rationale you relied on to advise President Trump to accept this unprecedented gift from your former legal client. Can you make a promise today that you will disclose that?
Disclose what, Ranking Member?
I assume there was a letter or some sort of statement from your office to the White House to advise them that you felt it was permissible?
First, to address my role with Qatar, as I addressed with you during my confirmation hearing, I disclosed it in my SJQ. In private practice, I worked for Qatar for anti-human trafficking for the World Cup. That was my only involvement, and I made that very clear, and I'm very proud of everything I've done with anti-human trafficking. Obviously, in preparing any advice for the President on a jet or anything else, we consult with the Office of Legal Counsel. The confidentiality applies to their input as well. And Chairman, if you would approve and vote to approve, as Chairman Grassley said, excuse me, Ranking Member, as Chairman Grassley said, my employees, we would answer your letters a lot faster, yet you're stalling them at every stop. And to go back to your previous question, your city has a murder rate 5 times higher than New York's. 571 homicides last year. If you were serious about protecting your people, you would be asking this administration for help. You're saying that we're coming into your state and your city. We're there to help make America safe and Illinois safe, whether or not you want to.
I believe cutting federal grant programs to law enforcement in my state and across the nation does not make us any safer, and you've done just that. You've supplanted that decision by sending in National Guard troops to California and other places. That is a situation where the governors have not asked for that help. If you truly wanted to do this on a bipartisan basis, you wouldn't defy a governor, you would work with them. I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared to work with this administration. But cutting these grants to law enforcement does not make us any stronger as a nation or give us the tools we need to reduce crime in Chicago. Now, I'd just like to ask you, when it came to this Cutter situation, did you consult with the ethics office in the Department of Justice before making your decision on this gift of a jet?
Chairman, I didn't gift a jet to anyone. My Office of Legal Counsel provides confidential advice to the President, to the White House, period. And you're conflating two issues. Cutting grants, I was very clear about what grants we've cut and what grants we haven't, only 7%. And if you have a grant in Illinois that you think that I've cut that is protecting law enforcement officers or your people, you personally call me and I will work with you to turn that grant back on. I think many of the Democrats here can tell you, I have worked with them to turn grants back on. There's an appeal process. Tell me a specific grant that I have turned off in Illinois that would help law enforcement, and I will work with you. But you have not done that.
Did you
and
take
again,
a look?
the National Guard is on the way right now as we speak. Oh, by the way, so is Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. You're sitting here grilling me, and they're on their way to Chicago to keep your state safe.
Madam Attorney General, it's my job to grill you. Investigation of your agency is part of my responsibility and this committee. You may not like the experience, but others have weathered the storm and answered questions in a respectful manner.
Can you tell me the grants,
Yes.
ranking member, please?
Take a look at the president's budget on HIDA grants. What happens to it in his proposed budget?
I'd be glad to meet with you on the
It's
grants.
cut by 1/3 from $300 million to 196. That's one example of a grant that works, and your administration has suggested cutting it in the budget lies ahead. I want to ask you about items in a letter I sent you in July that you have not answered. In February, you made a public claim that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now for review, end of quote. You then produced already public information and no client list at a major media event hosted at the White House. Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list, our July 6th memo. You also didn't let me respond to the HIDA question. The budget transfers $196 million for high-intensity drug trafficking areas to the Office of Justice Programs, OJP. The Justice Department will continue to administer those grants under OJP in 2026.
Going back to the Epstein files, according to another whistleblower who made a protected disclosure to my office, you pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memo stating, quote, there's no incriminating client list. Why was the July 7th memo unsigned?
The July 7th memo came from the FBI and the Department of Justice. Director Patel answered those questions very clear. And You know, Senator Durbin, I find it very interesting that you refused repeated Republican requests to release the Epstein flight logs in 2023 and 2024. You fought that. Did you take money from Reid Hoffman, campaign donations,
Never
who was a
heard-
huge Epstein friend? Why did you fight for years? Why did you fight to not disclose the flight logs, Senator Durbin?
I can tell you I did not refuse. One of the senators here wished to produce those logs, and I asked her to put it in writing, and she never did.
Yeah, I think Senator Blackburn would quarrel with you on that. But
And
that's
I will
up to the
quarrel
two
with
of
you as to read somebody that you mentioned I never heard of.
Reid Hoffman.
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name?
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. And you won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I got to
Mr.
interject
Chairman?
something here.
Mr.
before I
Chairman.
get to Pam.
Mr. Chairman, since Senator Durbin referred to me, I would really appreciate the opportunity to correct the record.
Proceed.
Because Senator Durbin knows I repeatedly asked for those flight logs. I brought up the subpoena. You even shut down the committee because you didn't want that, and you know I submitted that in writing, and you continue to misrepresent that, and I am not going to let that record